Hi, everybody. Welcome to the first Acorn webinar hosted by Sprout. If you're not sure what Sprout is, no problem. I will be going through that in a couple of minutes here. I'm really excited. Today, we're going to talk about clean data and clear direction. And first and foremost, for those of you who don't know me, I would love to introduce myself. My name is Jenny Tran, and I work as a customer enablement manager here at Acorn. For those of you I have met, you would know that I started in the customer success space when I joined Acorn, kind of everything from being a customer success manager to onboarding and implementation. And kind of what makes me qualified to talk to you about these things is like understand what happens after onboarding. Learning just doesn't stop once you've implemented and migrated all that data over. And sometimes the small things that we already know, or the small things that we kind of learned at the very beginning of onboarding implementation, we don't really pick up those habits along the way. So to start off 2026 properly, I thought I would go through some basic items that you might not be playing around with in the system every day. So for those of you who are wondering what the heck is Sprout, well, we're really, really excited about this Sprout campaign here at Acorn. It is our digital program. You'll notice that instead of acorns, it's leaves, and that's because we've got 5 kind of phases that exist with Sprout, all the way from onboarding, so a new customer and activation, all the way to community. So really making sure that we're doing all the right things here at Acorn that help our customers thrive. Truly, at the end of it, we really want to make sure that while you're onboarding and activating, you're getting the best kind of engagement out of our success team. Following that, you have ongoing learning and engagement. So you're actually understanding additional best practices. You're knowing what's going on with the features as we release them and not just kind of being left in the dark. Oftentimes in SaaS, we kind of find that your learning is kind of stifled to the very beginning and then it drops off. And so this initiative is here to help with that. So insights and signals, I'm going to get into that as well. Don't worry, you don't have to take notes. We will send you a copy of this recording, but that's actually making sure we're listening to our customers. So the feedback that you're giving us, what features are hard to understand, what features would you like to see, we're actually going to be taking that into consideration moving forward. And of course, community and advocacy. Now, I may be biased, but I think community is going to be my absolute favorite part of it. It's really making sure that our customers can not only just learn from us, but also learn from each other, right? So we really want to build a forum for you so that when you have a specific use case, for example, if you're in healthcare or you're in the government space, you're actually going to somebody and getting actual answers from another Acorn customer in the exact same space that you have. So I'm really excited about that, but let's get on to the webinar without further ado. So we're going to be talking about goals to growth here. And I kind of want to talk about why we started this kind of goals to growth. You'll take a look at this agenda. We'll talk about why with this webinar, why now. We'll talk a little bit into clean user data, and then of course, clean content. So learning plans that actually align to your business goals. And now at the very end of that, user data, we've got a ton of that, content and campaigns and programs, we've got a ton of that. But how can you make sure that you're translating that into reporting that actually proves the value of Acorn at your organization? And then, of course, we're going to leave time at the very end for some Q&A. And again, going to talk about what's next with Sprout. Now, I will be taking questions at the end. I'll try to leave about 15 minutes for that. I do encourage you to, if you have any questions, pop that into the Q&A section of our Zoom webinar, and then I'll be able to address them. Full disclosure, if we're not going to be able to answer the rest of your questions, or it's a bit of a hardy question that requires a bit deeper dig into your organization and your platform, we absolutely will follow up with you or one of our support team members will. Okay, so again, why this webinar, why now? Most teams that I work with aren't starting from zero. They're actually starting with a lot. So like I mentioned before, a lot of users, a lot of content, and it's really challenging to turn that into something intentional at the end of the day. Like I mentioned previously, most organizations kind of just focus on the initial setup of the data migration. But then we don't get into the habit of cleaning up, old or dirty data as we move forward. So maybe you have legacy data that no longer reflects your organization. Maybe there's content libraries that actually grow faster than your strategy, right? How many times do we see that? We see a certification that we think everybody's going to want to take, and then that gets updated along the way, but in our L&D system, it's outdated. Or reporting that just feels reactive and not confident. I know so well being asked to run a report and then seeing that report and it's full of dirty, messy data. And then I have to put my Excel hat on or, try to get somebody who understands spreadsheets better than I do and try to clean that up before I deliver that to my executive leadership team. And this whole thing is pretty much, for example, if you are at an important event or you're taking pictures of your phone, my heart absolutely drops when my camera stops taking photos and I realize that I have not cleaned all that, blurry photos, old screenshots, just all that crap that's sitting inside of my camera roll in my photo library. So really trying to prevent that anxiety for our L&D and HR teams. These are the habits that we kind of want to get you into. And like I said, if you learn something new, amazing. And if not, then I encourage you to maybe just take one action out of the presentation that I'm going to show you today, and just put that as an initiative and something for you to do this week or even this quarter. So let's talk about clean and aligned user data. I will be showing you my quick and easy hacks on how to view inactive users. We will be taking a quick look at auditing user roles. Something that I don't see a lot of our users do is actually reviewing the custom user fields. And something that I realize not a lot of our customers know about is the actual ability to merge and to link accounts. So I'm going to go ahead and share my Acorn screen here. You should be taking a look um, at one of our Acorn environments. And one of the easiest things that you can always do that I feel like a lot of our customers always miss is just taking a look at who's logging on and who's logging off. Now, I hear a lot of our admins reach out to our support team and say, who's been on the system longest, who hasn't been on the system at all. This is a really good way to validate and clean up the amount of licenses that you have as well. So just a quick, easy pop into your admin panel, popping into user management, and then of course, browse and update users. Heading off to the very bottom here, I'll just go ahead and remove my filter. But this is something that never really gets utilized, which is just the last access button. Now, if you're like me and you're seeing people who have never logged in, that might be a bit of a red flag to not actually really clean up your Acorn system, but maybe your HRIS system. Something that's also really important is if you are taking a look at users who are needing to be compliant for a specific system and you're not understanding when or not they're logging in, we obviously can take a look at this last access panel here. Like I said, if you have any questions, go ahead and pop them in the chat. I'll try my best to address them as I go along the way. But we are actually going to touch on reporting at the very end. Something that I do want to point out is our user report does not get utilized as much as I would like it to. So just popping into reporting on the bottom of our admin panel here, and then click on to new reports. Don't forget, you can always run a user report here to understand what the logins are like from your system, who's utilizing it, etc. At the beginning of onboarding, something that I notice is there are going to be a ton of cooks in the kitchen, right? So we've got somebody working on the widgets for editing the homepage. We've got somebody sorting out cohorts. We've got a technical person sorting out the HRIS system. And many of these roles require you to be an admin. So what I see our main L&D and HR admins do from the get-go is to make every single person a role that is not an end user. The second thing that I would encourage you to do is go ahead and start auditing your assigned roles. So if I'm taking a look at this and I've got 15 Acorn admins in my platform, however, I operate on a team of 2 to 3, that is a huge red flag for me. So maybe there are some employees there who have more access than you actually want them to. We really want to make sure we're being compliant with the data that we're showing across our organization here. And so again, I would encourage you to take a look at that. If you don't want somebody to be an admin, but you see them there, go ahead and click on the unassigned role, select accordingly, and then click confirm here on the bottom right-hand corner. However, if you are also taking a look at all these items here, if you are a tenancy admin or you want somebody to be a tenancy admin, but not the rest of Acorn, this is what you're going to be assigning them as a role. Content creator, pretty straightforward here, somebody who's going to be creating content. So maybe adding in resources, live learning, etc. And then of course, a user manager. It is important to note here that a user manager is not the manager of your organization. It is somebody who's managing all of that user data. And so we really want to be intentional with assigning and unassigning these user roles here. And I encourage you to look across all your different tenancies as well. So don't forget, we have this drop down button to view all the different tenancies if you are a multi-tenant user. A common mistake, speaking about user manager and user data, is I don't see people cleaning up their custom fields as much as they should. So obviously just going into tenancy manage here on my admin portal and then clicking on manage custom fields, you'll notice we've got two different areas. We've got the user fields and then on the right-hand side, session and content field that has to do with actual content. We will touch on that later. But sometimes people will map their HRIS system to user fields here. And I notice that it's going to exist within the same platform, but there might be a spelling discrepancy or something that really messes up that user data. You would absolutely be surprised as somebody who worked in the customer success department here, how many times I saw, for example, hire date once and then hire dot date a second time that actually came from their HRIS system. And you want to make sure that when you're mapping around these fields, that it's going to be a one-to-one copy of what you're syncing with in your HRIS system, or else the fields in Acorn will create duplicate data. Therefore, if you're taking a look at someone's hire date and this is marked as a date, no data will show up, but hire dot date may have a date formatted incorrectly. So again, being really intentional with that and not really just taking a look at these fields themselves, but the content of the fields. Oftentimes I see people who have drop downs for departments and it would be customer success, customer space success, capital C, capital S, C.S, and the list goes on. You kind of get understand what I'm getting at there. But I really want to encourage my users to, just because you're migrating over from your HRIS system, maybe it's time to take a look at your HRIS system and how clean that can be as well. Because a lot of our fields here in the custom user fields translate over to reporting fields, you really want to be intentional with that Excel, like I said, so that you're not going back at the end and exporting an Excel sheet that you really have to kind of just hash and chop up because the data is incorrect. All right. So if I just go back to my home screen here, many of our users, especially folks who are both admins and both managers, don't link their accounts. And what do I mean by that? If I go to the very end here, what I have enabled in my platform on the bottom left-hand corner is this request account merge button. I don't see that get utilized often. And if you're in your platform and you don't see that, but you want it, definitely reach out to your support contact here at Acorn because we have to turn it on the back end for you. And then you will be able to not only request an account merge, but also request an account link as well. You can also access this by going to the admin panel and then under user management. These are where all of the account merges and linked requests go to. But what that means is oftentimes I see this with folks who get married or change their last name, is they will have an account with all of their information under their old maiden name or their old name, and then they want to log in with their new name. Now, with their new name, oftentimes, if again, you are coming from an organization with an HRIS system, or a single sign-on system, it's going to create two profiles for you. So if you request an account merge, obviously we're going to put in the previous and then confirming the previous account because it's my current one. So I want to be logged into the current username and then put in my previous here and then request an account merge that will actually merge all of my data so that I can log in with my new email address or my new first and last name and all of my certifications, etc. All of that learning history will be translated over. Of course, this is something that an admin will have to approve. Now, what is an account link? So an account link is really, really beneficial for, like I said, admins as well as supervisors. We all know here in Acorn that as a supervisor, you get that supervisor tab, but you do not get the admin tab and vice versa. If you're logging in under your admin account, you don't get that supervisor tab to take a look at the progress from your direct reports, do capability assessments, etc. So what we encourage our admins to do is to have one admin account and then your regular account. So for example, my email address is jenny.tran@acorn.works. Mayhaps I'll have an Acorn admin account called jenny.tran plus admin, and then my regular single sign-on account that I sign on with my regular email address. If I merge those two, what then happens when I log in? If I click my little icon on the top hand side, next to my username, I will have a little button, a little arrow, and that actually allows me to swap back and forth between my admin account and my supervisor account. That way, all of the information imported from the HRIS is accurate. I get the supervisor account, which is what I'm supposed to be doing. And, when I'm managing capability assessment, answering momentums on behalf of my direct reports, etc. But as an HR or an L&D administrator, I'm able to swap over to my admin account and, do all the admin items that Acorn allows me to do. So that's something that's really important. And I really encourage you, if you are an admin, but you don't have a linked account, definitely reach out to support and we can go ahead and initiate that change for you, and even get on a call with you to do a little bit of a tutorial if we want. All right. So let's kind of talk about the next order of business, which is linking plans aligned to business goals. So one of the biggest challenges that I hear from L&D team is, we have a lot of content, but we're not super aligned that this is what the business needs anymore. And this is where we're managing capabilities, we're managing cohorts, where structured learning plans kind of really come into play. Since we've addressed all of the users, I do want to take a look at auditing some of the content that we currently have. So quickly jumping back into here. Now, if you haven't played around with a new content catalog yet, it is such a big facelift. This was a huge initiative for us in 2025. And so I encourage you all to do that. But obviously with the new content, it means that we've got different areas for us to manage little data pieces such as categories and tags, etc. Something that I would actually encourage you to teach your new end users is getting used to the My Content and the visibility tabs here for all the different types of content that we have, because the content library can get quite overwhelming. And so if you're expecting somebody to say, I want you to go in and I want you to find this live learning, get in the habit of going ahead and just filtering out live learning. It makes the catalog less daunting. It makes everything a lot easier. And it encourages your end users to be power users of the Acorn platform. Speaking of content, I do want to get in the new area. We are managing our categories and tags. So it used to kind of sit on its own button, but now what we can do is it's gotten a little bit of a facelift. So if you head into tenancy management here, and just below manage custom fields is manage categories and tags. I actually will go back to manage custom fields, but I do want to talk about this first. What I see a lot are a bunch of test categories and tags, and that never gets cleaned up. This makes the catalog obsolete because if an end user is going in and they're actually using the categories and tags for what it's meant to be, but they're not returning the results that they're looking for, it really does encourage them to not use the system as much and encourages, less use of the catalog because they don't feel like this is relevant data to them. So if you're one of those people who has, test onboarding, test and then your name here under categories and tags, please do go ahead and start cleaning this up. It's not the prettiest and the easiest thing that you would think of to do every day, but managing that actually gets a lot more helpful in the future. Remember that with each piece of content, you can tag one category. I should say tag categories, that might get confusing. You can attach one category, but attach as many tags as you want. And so just kind of keep that in mind when you're hashing out what to call which. For example, under category, something that you may have could be leadership and management. And then within tags like that, it could be, leadership training, communication training, etc. So just making sure that those are quite relevant and thoughtfully planned out will really help out your catalog. You can also click on view and catalog to take a look at all of the content that's being assigned to these specific categories, if that's going to be helpful for you. And then, of course, when you click on tags, it's going to let you know, similar to how workflows work, it's going to let you know how many pieces of content has been applied to that. If you're finding that a category or a tag is no longer relevant, instead of deleting it, you can go ahead and hide that. And even just me taking a look at something here today, I would really like this for all to be capitalized just to make it a little bit easier on the eyes and a lot more consistent with the rest of my program and with the rest of my organization. So just small things like that can make a huge difference. I did mention previously that I was going to address, let's see here, the custom fields. Recently, we've been getting a ton of questions about custom fields and certificates. So I do want to go over that today as well. So again, everything is kind of living under tenancy management, the topics that we're going through today. And then if I go down to manage custom fields, just keep in mind that similar to user fields, I'm kind of going to give you the same spiel about content fields. Now, content fields are going to be within courses, and session fields are going to be within live learnings. So what does that mean? It means if you have additional fields outside of the title, description, categories and tags, etc., that pertain particularly just to your organization and maybe not to a wider kind of audience, this is where you're going to be creating content fields or session fields. You can make it mandatory or not whether to be added when a course is being created or when a live learning is to be created. But a massive benefit to this is if you are a customer with your own internal database. For example, if a course is called one thing in Acorn, but in the back end, it's ID number 2, you can go ahead and put in something like internal ID number. You can have a free text, a multi-select if they're going to have multiple ID numbers, a single select, or maybe you can even have date. And then you can put in a helper text as well. You can make this required. And so every single time you are then going to create a course in your organization, the internal ID number is required. Just to show you very quickly what that will look like, I'll go ahead and I'll create a custom course here. And then at the very bottom, you see internal ID number. Keep in mind that with these custom fields, as well as these session fields, remember sessions pertain to live learnings, they actually could be translated on certificates as well. I'll go ahead and just delete this because it is a shared demo environment and I don't want to mess anything up. But something really cool that one of our not-for-profit organizations recently did was they required each agenda topic for live learning sessions to be listed in the certificate. So the certificate will say, Jenny Tran has completed this, but what did Jenny Tran actually study and what was actually covered on the topics? So what they did was they had multiple session fields created, something that looks like this. And they had, 3 required topics that their state actually looked at in order to be qualified for their external learning. So they had 3 different agenda topics, all were required. And then as the content creator created these agenda topics, we were able to create custom certificates that actually had those agenda topics on, so that when you downloaded the certificate, it was a multi-PDF of pretty much everything that they covered within the live learning. A quick note, now that I'm just on custom certificates, if you want to take a look at what that looks like, go ahead and pop into course management and custom certificates will sit down here. As you create custom user fields, you can see that they will populate here. So I've got all my custom user fields here, and then custom course fields and custom session fields will of course be on there as well. So a very cool tidbit to go ahead and just kind of take a look at. Something that I do want to talk about are capabilities. So if you are an organization who uses capabilities, this gets covered probably around every performance review quarter for our support team quite often. And it's making sure that the content is mapped to the right capability. Again, you would think that it's common practice, but not a lot of people remove the capabilities and the tests that they do, especially around implementing and onboarding. And so I encourage you to just take a quick peek of that and just make sure that it's relevant and still pertaining to your organization. So just taking a look at admin here and then clicking on to capability dashboard. When you map capabilities to organizational content, this is where you're actually going to be able to take a look at all the cohorts you currently have and the capabilities that are mapped to them. So if I take a look at accounting here, I want to make sure that as we move forward and as we grow in our organization, that the capabilities are, pertaining to each user within these cohorts, and that this is something that they can actually take a look at. Because remember, when employees are logging into Acorn, they're not just logging into Acorn to take content for the L&D side, but they're also taking a look at what's expected out of the organization based on their capabilities and their assigned capabilities. So if you want to take a look at this, you have the option of removing them, but you also have the option of just taking a look at the proficiency levels that have been assigned to these items. So if I wanted to go ahead and click and add capabilities, we've changed the way that this looks as well. It's a lot more consolidated. If you were a capability user in the past, you would know that we had all of the names and all of the sets with the different proficiency levels. However, we've consolidated. So you can now then click onto the different proficiency level from a foundational to an advanced perspective, or select all of that's what your organization needs, and go ahead and confirm and save them from there. From a cohort level, you can also do this from a content level as well. So just taking a look at your catalog here. If I go ahead and I want to take a look at some of the courses that I offer, maybe I want to go, let's see here, into one of these courses. Don't forget, you'll be able to audit the capabilities and the proficiencies assigned to these items as well. So just go ahead and clicking on the cogwheel. There we go. This is where we're going to be able to update the course. And I can go ahead and add my capabilities in here as well. So remember, we're not adding just capabilities to people, we can add it to content, and this is where all of our capability assessments can then be encompassed and reviewed. Okay, so what I do want to take a look at as well is auditing your workflows. Oftentimes we get quite a lot of questions about workflows and how they work with each other. Rest assured, we are actually going to be updating our Help Center articles to reflect what it looks like when you add multiple workflows with each other. And we're actually going to be hosting another webinar all dedicated to workflows as well. So stay tuned for that one. But something that does not get a lot of attention is the amount of workflows that we currently have in our system. So for example, if I'm just popping into workflows here, I can see that I've got, a couple due date workflows, a couple compliance workflows, some auto workflows, and a test workflow. If you are one of these users, start auditing them. Take a look if they're even applied to content or not, and delete them if you don't need them, right? So for example, this test workflow I know has been applied to part 1 of Intro to AI. Now I do have to remove this from the Intro AI before I delete the workflow. It's just a precaution that we have here at Acorn. But again, just taking a look at the workflows, I would encourage you to look at your compliance calendar because this can actually help you plan workflows quite well. And so oftentimes we're getting feedback that new users are being added, they're being auto enrolled into a cohort, which then auto enrolls them into a workflow, and they're getting assigned content that might not be relevant to them. This is something that I would absolutely take a look at as well. And if you're an organization on the flip side that is not taking a look at workflows quite often, this can alleviate a lot of administrative stress from you. So just go ahead and play with the workflow types. Maybe you want a course to be due on a specific date. Maybe you want a user to be auto enrolled as soon as they get their Acorn account provisioned, or for compliance reasons, somebody needs to take a course every 1 or 2 years. We can go ahead and create those workflows in your Acorn system and assign them to the right content. And then as well as email workflows, I don't see people using a lot of this, but we do get a lot of questions for, how can the supervisor be notified every single time their direct report gets enrolled into this specific course so that that conversation can be brought up during their one-on-ones or during their performance, management conversations. I encourage you to use email workflows. We can trigger an email to multiple users. It could be the user, the facilitator, any contact actually, if you use the user picker, or the supervisor every time their direct report either gets enrolled into something or completes something. And a really cool thing administrative wise from this that I don't see people utilizing is the completion as well as the attached certificate if enabled. So if you are a manager or you have managers who want a copy of every single certificate that their direct report receives from a specific course or from a specific live learning, you can go ahead and enable that here. Okay, now that we've covered that, I do want to take a look at some reporting. So we've covered users and auditing the user content. We've covered courses and live learning sessions and auditing those user content as well. What kind of reporting can we have that will make your life easier? So I'll talk about creating report presets. I'll talk about scheduling reports, and I will also talk about some report recommendations that may be helpful for you and your organization. So again, popping back into my Acorn system here, I'm going to go ahead into reports. Something that I also want to point out is reporting officers. At the beginning of this webinar, we talked about user management and assigning user roles. If you have a user who just needs access to reports, don't neglect the reporting officer role. This is very helpful. For example, marketing may not be in the system as much, assigning capabilities and creating content. That might be your education team, but they do want to pull stats and sometimes want to be able to download reports that aren't just the simple kind of out of the box reports that we offer supervisors. So you can also manage reporting content as well. This is also a little bit newer to our reporting officer system, but if you want them to only be able to report on certain content, my library is, of course, enormous, and so it might take a while for this to load, but you can select reportable content for these reporting officers as well. So whether or not you want them to report on all 854 pieces or just a few that pertains to marketing, you can go ahead and select that content. Okay, great. So just quickly popping back into reports like I mentioned. Something that you can also do is share the reports that are being scheduled. So I will show you how to do that as well. But let's work from the bottom up of that list before. When you are creating new reports, there are a few that will definitely help you out with the items that I covered today. I already pointed it out, but one namely being the user report. The other items that I would encourage you to use that I, again, don't see people use very often actually is the content overview report. So this content overview report is really cool because it shows you all of the content that's in your system. You just saw how long it took for me to load all of that piece of content, all 854 pieces. And maybe I want to sunset some of them. And starting off with an Excel report of all of the content I have in my system, it's a great place to start. You don't have to select custom. You can clear all time and dates. And doing this will run you a report of all the content in your system. For me, it will take a while to generate, but obviously, as admins that you don't have to wait for an account to kind of finish and finalize before you click out of it. But I highly, highly, highly recommend that content report. Okay, so just popping into that, we talked about user reports, we talked about content overview report. Another one that I would absolutely recommend actually is the form report. I know that we didn't cover that as often, forms, but oftentimes forms get kind of neglected. We create so many test items and then we don't use any of them. So then it kind of just bogs down our system. So it's definitely something that I would encourage you to use. And then, of course, the content completion report. So what are your users actually taking a look at? Here, you can report on all content across all the different tendencies, but what courses are actually valuable, right? So maybe before you even start using that content report that I just talked about, you could actually take a look at the ones that are being used and sunset the ones that people are not enrolling for very often. So I will just quickly create a report here for you. So I'm just going to select a content, and I would like for it to be a course that sits within Acorn. And let's just do part one of that AI course because we took a look at that previously. And then I'm going to go ahead and click next. Now, if I was in charge of this report and I need it to be scheduled to me because I need to take a look at all of the users who have completed that, this is where we're going to create presets and we're going to take a look at scheduling as well. Of course, you can do this with any report. For me, I want to show suspended users and I want to show users who are not complete. This is quite important. Sometimes people don't select this and they're just getting a report of everybody who's completed it. But sometimes you really want to see who you have to follow up with, right? Taking a look at including user fields. Like I said, this is why we want to clean up the user fields because it pulls back and ties into reporting, and then cohort. Now we all know if you're not selecting anything under cohorts and if you're not selecting anything under user fields, it's going to go ahead and generate you all of that information. But let me go ahead and just start generating this report here. Okay, amazing. So now that I have my report, what I want to do first and foremost before I start scheduling it out is saving it as a preset. So I'm going to call this AI course and I will save that as a preset. So now every single time I generate this report, I don't have to select the parameters that we just previously saw on the last screen. But last but not least, if I want to go ahead and schedule it out, we're just going to click on the schedule report. We're going to call this the AI weekly report. Actually, instead of completions, because I wanted everybody to generate, even the ones who haven't completed it, I will call this a progress report. And then I will go ahead and click on next here. Perfect. So this is where I'm going to go ahead and find my presets. I have a ton of presets. A lot of them say the same thing. Mayhaps I want to go back and clean this up as well. But I'm going to go ahead and do this. I want it run a weekly every Tuesday at 7 in the morning. So I'll go ahead and do that. I want to send myself an email alert and I want to notify everybody who's on my team. So I want to also have this sent to Yuki Seto. Go ahead and confirm. Next, this is where I'm going to save the schedule. And now I know how to run a report, set it as a preset, and schedule it. You can see here that there are a ton of tests as well. Again, something that I encourage you to take a look at is if this is not active and you're getting reports that you don't want, go ahead and just, turn that off. So that's how everything kind of ties back into your users, your course content, your live learning content, and reporting. I will quickly go back to this presentation here because I would love to address some Q&A. I already did see some that popped in the system, so bear with me while I take a look at this. My goal here is to take a look at about 3 different questions and answer them if possible. So bear with me while I take a look at this. Okay, let me just move this to my next screen here, and let me just go through some of the questions here. A few of these questions are a little bit more, let's see here, a little bit more in depth, so we can definitely follow up with you. But let me read one out here. Is the best practice when creating forms to create a test version and then create another test version after getting feedback, and then only creating the final version that will be used after having a work test? Or can we test things out in the form, make changes, and then make that the final? Okay, that's a great question. I know that we didn't touch on forms very often, but we can definitely address this one now. It sounds like what you're doing is creating multiple task forms and getting feedback from that, and then going ahead and finalizing that with another test form. Now, I'm actually not too sure how you're currently doing it, but my best practice that I give to customers is templates, templates, templates. The reason being is you can adjust and modify the templates as many times as you want. And then you don't actually have to go back and create new ones and bog down your test templates or your form templates, my apologies, with those test items. So in my admin tab panel, I'm going to go down here, and then I'm going to go ahead and click on form templates. If you're not creating forms with form templates, this is definitely where I want it to start. We can create a test template just for the point of this. I'll edit an existing template. But this is where you're going to be able to hash out as many questions as many times as you like. And that will be the final live version every time. So when you are creating a form test template, what you can then do is click on create. And then obviously we've got the name and the description, and then we've got 3 different form types. The feedback activity is going to be one where you can add into courses. The session registration is if they're registering for a live learning session. And then the momentum form template is the one that you're going to be using when you are creating momentums. Now, if you are a momentum user and you are not using test templates, I beg you please just to be the first thing that you should be changing when you are editing your Acorn momentum items. This is because if you are modifying it, it will automatically edit on one form and you don't have to create those, 3 templates like you said. So that's how I would be using it. Now, don't forget, when you are creating templates, you first have to activate them with this, green deactivate button before you can see that across your courses, your live learnings, and your momentums. And as soon as you change something in the form template, that will automatically reflect there. So you could have a live version of a course. You could have a test form template, use that template, get whatever feedback you want, and then just edit it directly from these form templates, and it will automatically be reissued in the live version, so you're not creating multiple test versions. You can also deactivate it as well. I absolutely do not want people to be deleting forms because remember, if you have a legacy form, you delete it, you won't be able to pull data from that in your reporting. So deactivate it instead, and you'll be able to get all of the answers that you've ever gotten from that form, even though it's no longer added or available to fill out in your Acorn system. Okay. The second question I have here, is there a way to sort categories list alphabetically? That's a great question. I have heard that as an enhancement request before. Let's take a look and confirm together because I'm not 100% sure. So let's go back into manage tags and categories. Unfortunately, it looks like not, but you know what? Writing that down because that's a really, really good enhancement request. So I'm going to say tag from A to Z. I know that we recently made it so that our catalog could be filtered from A to Z, but we can go ahead and add that as enhancement request and for tags. That's really great feedback. Thank you, Anita. Okay, perfect. Awesome. I do see a couple items now. Let's just take a look. Um, huh. Okay. Very cool. So I'm getting a few enhancement requests, which is lovely to see. Thank you so much for adding that in. And then James, I see that you have an issue with your performance template. Let me screenshot that and follow up with a support team. I would love to know the actual process. And if it's an issue, let's go ahead and fix that. Maybe we can actually brainstorm a way to actually make that better for you. So if you didn't get your questions called out today, rest assured this is being saved and I will go ahead and follow up with you after this call. Just saving this question. Okay, amazing. I went ahead and I saved that. Speaking of following up with all of you after this call, I want to talk about what's next with Sprout. And so, what's next? We've got two webinar series. This is one, like I said, this is part of our best practice series. However, we have another one that we are going to be hosting every middle of the month called our Insights and Signals webinar series. Our Insights and Signals webinar series is meant to be bite-sized webinar content. This is meant for customers to be spotlighted and highlighted if you wanted to share something about your organization. This is where we're going to have support team members come in and share something new, cool, and exciting that they found out. If you are familiar, I would encourage you to check out our release roundups. That is where our bite-sized release roundup videos, if you receive them on packed notes, are showcased on YouTube by our awesome product managers. And so we also want to highlight that in the deeper depth webinar format with our insight signals. The next one is going to be hosted in mid-February. I will send everybody an invitation for that. For North America, it's going to be one day ahead of the Australians. And so I need to confirm those dates with you. And then our next best practice series is going to be everything on live learning. We get a lot of feedback that live learning could be quite daunting to learn in itself. It's easier to create content, but all the nuances of live learnings could be difficult to grasp. And so, as our second best practice webinar series, we are going to be creating a playbook on live learning, of course, today with our first. And so, you will all be getting an invitation for that. I encourage you to sign up. But without further ado, thank you so much for joining me today. I had a lot of fun. Wow, you are officially the first users for our first Acorn webinar. So thank you so much. I will follow up with everybody and take a look at that chat. But I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day. If you're in Australia, rest of your evening for North Americans. And I will catch you at the next webinar.